All right, so last time we were talking about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which barely passed, but was passed in Congress, and the president signed it into law in 1854. Right after the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups are going to rush their supporters into Kansas. If you remember, Kansas will now have a pro-sovereignty approach to the slavery question. Will the people of Kansas ask for permission to own slaves, or will they ask for permission to be a free state when they ask for permission to become a state? So there's many steps in this process. First step is you have to have elections. Elections for the legislature to write the Constitution, to make the new laws of the territory, and ask for permission to become a state from the United States Congress. And we are going to see our elections in the spring of 1855 in Kansas, and a pro-slavery legislature will be elected. Now, there were only 1,500 voters living in Kansas at the time, so you would think that there would only be 1,500 votes cast. However, there were 6,000 votes cast. Thousands of pro slavery supporters from Missouri, the next door neighbors of Kansas, are going to cross over the border just to vote in the election. These Missourians are going to travel in armed groups, become known as the Border Ruffians, and basically impose their will to cheat the system and make Kansas a slave state. Uh, Soon after the election, the new Kansas legislature is going to pass laws, not surprisingly, supporting slavery. One law will even restrict political office to pro slavery candidates only, which means if you are against slavery, you can't even run for office, which means you can't affect the laws of Kansas. They are basically cheating the system and shutting out all opposition to slavery, securing uh, slavery in the new state of Kansas. Now, the anti slavery people are going to refuse to accept these laws. Obviously, they view them as wrong. They look at the election as something that was they cheated on, so there's no possible way that we can accept this new government and their terrible laws that they're making. The anti slavery people are going to refuse, and they are going to arm themselves because the pro slavery people are armed, and you can't bring only words and ideas to a gunfight. You might have to bring some guns to a gunfight because there's going to be a fight. These people are entrenched in their beliefs and they are not going to give up. And instead of accepting the laws, they are going to arm themselves, and the anti slavery people are going to have their own elections and adopt a constitution that's going to ban slavery. So by 1856, rival governments are going to exist in Kansas. There's going to be one government for slavery and one government against slavery. Each is going to ask Congress to be recognized as the official uh, government in Kansas. And the official government in Kansas will submit the official constitution of Kansas, and Congress will vote on that constitution and that Congress to become and that legislature to become the official state government of Kansas. Uh, and to make matters even more confusing, our government in Washington, D.C. is split over who should have the power in Kansas. Now, the president and the Senate are going to favor a pro slavery government, while the House of Representatives is going to back the forces opposed to slavery. So we are complicated. You live in a country where you have one set of laws saying you can do this and another set of laws saying you can't do that. It's very hard to go forward and do anything. And on a topic such as slavery, the whole world, the whole country wants to know what we're going to do next. So now we have a pro-slavery and an anti-slavery government, and we have these people arming themselves. So the outcomes of violence, the outbreaks of violence, are just inevitable. There's no stopping this. In May of 1856, a little bit more into the year of 1856, 800 slavery supporters are going to attack the town of Lawrence, which is the anti slavery capital, home of today's Kansas University. And they are going to sack the town. That means they're going to take the town, they're going to burn the hotel, they're going to burn the home of the governor, and they're going to destroy two newspaper offices. Newspaper offices are important because the only way of information coming in and going out is through newspapers. And soon after, the forces opposed to slavery are going to retaliate. They're going to fight back. John Brown, a man we will meet again, a fervent abolitionist, someone who is completely and totally against slavery, he believes God himself chose him to end slavery. Now, Brown had recently come to Kansas from Ohio with 6 of his own sons and a son in law. Now, when he heard of the attack on Lawrence, Brown goes into a rage. He is a wee bit unhinged mentally, uh, prone to anger and violence. So he vows to strike terror into the hearts of pro slavery people. Now, one night, Brown is going to lead 4 of his sons and 2 other men along the Potawatomi Creek, where they seize and kill 5 supporters of slavery. These are just examples of violence that are going to happen in Kansas. Attack after attack after attack after attack of armed bands roaming the territory, killing each other, to the point where the newspapers are going to start referring to this time period as Bleeding Kansas or the Civil War in Kansas. Now, a civil war, like we'll see later, is a conflict between citizens in the same country, or in this case, the same territory. It will be until after the fall of 1856, so with almost a year after the first elections, that the United States Army will have to come in and stop the bloodshed in Kansas. But by then, we have 200 people out of a territory that at most has 7 or 8,000 people in it. 200 people are going to be killed, and many more injured in this incident. This is not the only violence that is going to be caused by the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The violence that erupts in Kansas is going to spread to Congress. We'll meet an abolitionist senator, Charles Sumner of Massachusetts, who delivers a speech entitled "The Crime Against Kansas." From Massachusetts, he is a fervent abolitionist in his own right, yet doesn't go to Kansas and kill people over it. He just delivers speeches in Congress. Now, Sumner is going to lash out against the pro-slavery forces in Kansas, and he's going to criticize pro-slavery senators in his own building. Now, he criticizes a man named Andrew P. Butler continuously over his views on slavery and Kansas. Now, Andrew Butler has a distant cousin named Preston Brooks, who is a representative on the other side of the building. 2 days later, after the speech was given, Preston Brooks is going to walk into the Senate chamber. He is going to take his cane and hit Sumner over and over and over on the head and shoulders, whacking him with this cane. Now he's going to fall to the floor, bleeding and unconscious, and suffer injuries so severe and trauma so bad that it will take him years to come back to the Senate floor. He's lucky that he even lived through this situation, especially in those days with the medicine of that age. Now, what the book won't tell you, I'll let you fill you in on, the first thing he did was give an anti-slavery speech. That we have a dichotomy here. We have 2 men, John Brown, as you can see in the picture on 445, not using speeches, but using guns, holding a Bible, standing on the bodies of Confederate soldiers. We are going to see 2 men who are dead set against slavery, but go about it in 2 different ways. But because we see that this is stirring up emotions so strong on every side, this little mini Civil War, this little Bleeding Kansas, is just a preamble. It's just the previews to a much larger situation, which we call the Civil War. But we won't see the Civil War for another 3 or 4 years. So we have to keep on seeing what is going to happen. It's going to pile on these incidences to split our country apart in war. And we will talk more about that when we start talking about new parties and new behaviors from the existing governments on the next episode of Mr. Weatherall Teaches You Stuff About History. All right, you guys have a great day.